What's up, gentlemen? This is Rising Phoenix Podcast, the podcast about how to rise up after your divorce. I'm your host, Michael Rhodes. Let's get into it. Joining me today is Mr. John Hatcher. John, let's just jump right into it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, happy to do so. Happy to be here. I got my foray into all of this, ironically, by a breakup, and I had always dabbled in writing. It was a hobby of mine through college and graduate school, and I started an email list of kind of relatable, cathartic humor, and had a little following there, and people kept pushing me to write. I never wanted to do it, and I started writing just a blog, and I wrote about an anxious breakup I had, and that caught the attention of a movie producer down in Hollywood who wanted a screenplay. It was called Breaking Up Badly, and I met with him, and I decided, rather than having this as a one-shot, potentially bad film, I would write the book. So I wrote Breaking Up Badly and got an agent and an attorney, and that started going out. And what happened was my first publisher, loved the voice of it, but wanted an anxiety book for teens. And I thought, well, I was an anxious teen. This is perfect. I can write this. And that's really how it started. My first feature article was in Justine, a teen girl magazine.
Oh, wow.
Which was a bit of a stretch. But from there, I started writing features for Good Housekeeping, Prevention, Health, Reader's Digest. And then the teen anxiety book was my first, and that was in 2016. There's a subsequent book coming out, a sequel to that, in 2023. I have an adult book called Anxiety Hacks for an Uncertain World, which will be released in December.
Nice.
Targeted. Thank you. More for adults. It's an international release. And I have a regular self-help humor column on Psychology Today, which has been interesting. I've really enjoyed it. It's a pretty serious site, and I've brought a different flavor to it, to say the least. So I'm honored to have that opportunity. And my work is extensively peer reviewed, so I don't write in a vacuum of I wonder if this is working. I've got a lot of smarter people than me that are peer reviewing my work.
Nice.
For clinical efficacy. And what I do is I write and take the acronyms and the science and the clinicalese out of it and make stuff palatable for general audiences. But I can be reached at stateofanxiety.com or anxietyhacks.co. And that's who you're talking to today.
Well, I found you on Psychology Today. I'm a frequent reader. That's where a lot of my guests come from, to be quite honest with you. Yeah. And what caught my attention was an article or a blog post. I don't remember the exact title, but I remember Manxiety being sort of the highlight of the title.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, what the hell is that? And so I read that, and I was immediately connected with it. And let's talk a little bit about that particular blog post. Why did you write it? Have you gotten feedback? Like those kinds of things.
Yeah, so thank you for reading that. I actually coined the term because I've always been an anxious male, and I thought anxiety for men is different. It presents differently, whether it's acute, short-term, or chronic, long-term at 3 months or more. They've actually studied fraternal twins and showed that women are more affected by interpersonal relationships related to anxiety, while men are more sensitive to external factors like their career. And I think we can all relate to that as men, that it's these external things that are driving our anxiety, and it presents differently for men as well. So we'll see it as anger, irritability, chest pain, things that'll land us in the ER, and they'll say it's not a heart attack, it's anxiety. And that's literally what happened to me. I went to the ER with chest pain, convinced I was dying. And I remember it was a female doctor, and she came in and she just gently told me, sir, you're actually having an anxiety attack. And I thought, bullshit, I'm having a heart attack, I'm dying.
How dare you?
They gave me nitroglycerin and an EKG and all these things. And I thought, are you kidding me? I was embarrassed,
I bet.
But, that was kind of the foray into me figuring out what was going on. And unfortunately for men, there's a lot of this denial. And, we plug the holes however we can.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's with external things. We start with the denial, and then we move kind of into the distraction, and
Mhm.
that can take many forms. And unfortunately, it often takes the forms of substance abuse, or, we'll just work out too much, or we'll, do anything but accept the fact that, we're dealing with a stigmatized real condition, and we don't want to appear weak or vulnerable. And, it's hard for us to, we're conditioned to man up
Yes.
throughout, yeah, very early on, right? And
Yes.
we don't want to discuss these vulnerabilities with anybody else. There's kind of this unwritten rule that we have to be in control at all times. And this makes it really difficult to identify anxiety in men, even at really high levels. And, we'll go to the hospital, or we'll talk to, if we hopefully do eventually talk to a therapist, we'll present it as anything but what's actually going on, because we can't identify it. I couldn't identify it in myself. And, it's very common.
Yeah, and I think I see it all the time. I probably suffer from it as much as any man, except for I'm not too keen, as my Australian friends say, in accepting it. Like I'm not gonna. That's just not what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna isolate, and we'll get to loneliness, because I think what happens is this anxiety to be a man, right? To be tough, causes loneliness, because we're supposed to be tough, so we're not supposed to talk about it. But if we get around other men and we have conversations, it's going to bring things up, and we don't want to fucking do that, because that means we're gonna have, right, we're gonna have feelings. We might even fucking cry, like, fuck all that. And so then we isolate, right? And so that leads to
Right.
loneliness. And I think particularly, as we discussed briefly before hit the record button, it after a breakup, right? That seems to be when we isolate the most in some ways, right?
Yeah, that's a huge trigger. And, that first piece that I wrote on breaking up badly was related to, why am I handling this breakup so badly? I just gone through a shoulder surgery. I think it was like number 10. I've had 13 orthopedic surgeries, and 10 of them were shoulder. And I was in a sling, and I had just gone through this big breakup. My girlfriend at the time was going off to medical school from California to New York. And I didn't want to go, but I thought we'd just, have a long distance relationship. Things would work out. And
Right.
she had other plans. And so, she ended things, and I was literally on my floor trying to tie my shoe with one arm, and a fetus like T-Rex other arm. And I realized, man, I am really unhappy and lonely. And I started crying, and I'm like, I know there's some humor in here somewhere.
Right.
I'm trying to, I don't have Velcro shoes, but I can't tie my shoe, and I'm lonely and dumped. And, then the anxiety really kicked in, and I thought, I don't have anyone to talk to. And I think that's, there's a difference between loneliness and being alone. And being alone can be great.
Yeah.
It's redemptive. We do a lot of good things when we're alone. But loneliness is completely different. It's like when you're going through that situation and you don't have anyone to talk to. And it's also the biggest predictor of health and longevity for anyone. These close social ties. It's life or death. Your close social ties and relationships for men, which we're supposed to have. It's in our DNA. We're wired to have other bonds with men.
Yes.
But it's 22% of an effect on our longevity and our health. And, that's a big chunk, right? So we start out as boys feeling connected in our friendships as the same level as girls do, but we tend to neglect those personal relationships as we get older. And we're pursuing external success, our jobs, etc. And, we're conditioned to be independent, self-sufficient. And then we give up those relationships in lieu of financial pursuits. And research backs this up. And the irony of this is that focusing on the accumulation of wealth and material goods, et cetera, results in a decrease in our overall happiness and satisfaction. But in our defense, chasing money is much less scary than chasing male strangers to be friends. So,
That's very true and less creepy, I think, maybe.
yeah, and there's that perception. I had a
Yeah,
conversation yesterday about this with another man, and it's like, we all feel that when another guy's being friendly, like, what does he want?
right. Yeah,
Our threats perception goes up now, our threat radar, like,
yeah.
is this person? Oh, go ahead.
How much? No, I was just going to say, how much do you think of that is the jadedness of our society? Because when you go on Facebook and if you're in Facebook groups, or it seems like there's this feeling I get, or maybe even the world at large feels like someone's always trying to sell me something.
Yeah,
Right.
well, they are.
Right. Yeah. It's like, I mean, the Facebook group I run, I don't allow coaches in there because they come off as, oh, I want to help, but then it's just like, yeah, I'm really looking for clients, so I don't really give a shit
Yeah,
about any
yeah.
of you guys. I just want your money. And so I feel like that's part of our society now, like that used car salesmen fucked us. Like they started this shit,
Yeah,
right? I'm
sure.
gonna blame it on them. Like and so I think we kind of view everyone in that lens, and that can make you skeptical for anyone that is looking for a friend or is just trying to help or whatever. I think it's society is kind of, we've been jaded, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, especially now. There's
Yeah.
a lack of appreciation for fellow life out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And, I believe that love trumps all. I think that,
Agreed.
being vulnerable is a strength.
Yes.
It's not a weakness. And
100%.
when you get to that point, you realize it's like it's a epiphany. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a huge moment. And yeah, you might get upsold something, or somebody might approach you in a way you're like, damn it, I didn't see that coming. But I
Right.
source the humor in that. I mean,
Yeah.
last night I was out to dinner with my girlfriend, and the waiter was being really, really friendly, right? And I was like, oh, he's such a nice guy. And he brought some free stuff, and I'm like, God, this guy is just amazing. And then I noticed he was completely focused on my girlfriend. He was talking to her the whole time. And I'm like, good God, this guy's totally hitting on her right in front of me. Like, does he not see me? Am I not, am I
Right.
that much of a wuss that, he thinks this is okay?
Yeah.
And I just sourced the humor, and I'm like, way to go, hon. You got us some free stuff. Like, I got to take you out more to nicer restaurants, and, see how far we can take this. And, at some point in my life, that would have been a threat. When I was
Yeah.
younger.
Sure. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I was in the
Yep.
gym all the time, and you'll see these
Yep.
guys that are, just getting yoked, and they're all tatted up, and they're projecting this image. But that's not the real guy, and it's okay to to be you. And I've reached this point with age, and I think it takes a lot of guys that
Yeah.
to reach this with age, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You can't kind of proselytize this to younger guys, because I wouldn't have got it either. But I went through a lot, and so I have nothing to prove personally. Going through all the surgeries and accidents and stupidity that I've done, and all those surgeries, and then going through a cancer, excuse me, that was all. I'm very appreciative of all those things. And I had to prove to myself that I could get through all that. And then at the end of it, I looked at my friendships and the people that weren't there. And I was like, wow, I got to do a purge. I got to do a cleanse of these people.
Yeah.
And that was a very lonely time for me. I was taking Uber to chemo with a, barf bag. And I'm like, this can't be right. Where are my friends? And they were there when, it's time to party, or
Sure.
get wasted, or go to concerts, or hit on
Yeah.
girls. But, when it mattered, I had nobody. And that's when I felt really lonely, when I was really sick, going through chemo. And I'm like, what a bunch of assholes I have for friends. And I mean, I got rid of everybody, including my own sibling.
Oh,
so-
wow. I can relate to that. I'm the same way in terms of my brother. I don't talk to him, but how did you get through it? How did you survive, honestly, that time? Because you're not only dealing with what you're dealing with in terms of the cancer, and we can certainly dive into that a little bit more if you want to talk about just that experience, but that's tough enough. I seen my father struggle with it and ultimately succumb to it, but then to be isolated on top of that, how the hell did you survive that, honestly?
I looked at what other people were going through and I was like, there are people going through a lot worse than I am.
Mm.
I had just lost my maternal grandmother to a smoker's cancer. She never smoked. She had a lung cancer. I had a smoker's cancer. I never smoked.
Oh,
And as
wow.
soon as I got into remission, my mom was diagnosed with a breast cancer, very rare breast cancer called inflammatory breast cancer, which is 1% of all breast cancers. And she was stage 4 and she's still fighting it, which is miraculous. It spread to her brain. I looked at my mom, I looked at her resilience and I looked at other people that were going through huge losses. And, I licked my wounds for 3 weeks and I moved forward. And I was like, if these other folks can do what they're doing, I can dive in and source my why. And I wrote and I sourced the humor and everything that was going on. And in my instance, it was a bladder cancer. So there was a lot of humor. I had nothing but catheters. I was going home with bags on my leg and catheters, and the treatment was I called it dick rape. It was all up the urethra, man. And it was
Oh,
not,
Jesus.
you want to have your manhood put in peril. Yeah, that was it. And so
Oh,
even the
my
surgery was up the
goodness.
pee hole. And I had I'll tell you, once you have a tumor removed out the urethra and you take that first piss, you're gripping the walls and screaming. I had just
Ow.
nothing to prove after all of this, right?
Mm.
And my own brother was a smoker of many decades, and he saw the bag on my leg, and I said, "Look, this is coming for you if you keep smoking." And
Yeah.
he didn't want to have any of that. So,
Yeah.
I dug in. I dug in, and I found my why, and then I realized, I could find people that were better people, and I joined a men's group through my church, which was awesome, and made some really good bonds with guys that were able to be themselves. Um, and I just realized that if I'm going to, get through the things that I needed to get through for my mom and for myself, and I needed to tap into just some friendships.
What do you attribute that to, though? Because you, I don't want to say you could have easily, but you could have gone the other way and just said, "Fuck it, I'm done." So there was something within you. What do you attribute that to? Because I don't know that everyone has that ability to say, "All right, this is where I'm at. What do I need to do?" Do you think that came from some kind of foundational childhood thing? Was that something that was instilled in you, or how did you find that strength?
That's a great, but also extremely tough question, Michael. I tell you, um, I think it was innate, a lot of it. I just grew up not being a quitter, very resilient. And I had lost two buddies to suicide growing up. And
Mm.
uh, that just really hit me. And I thought, I definitely questioned it. I definitely questioned how I would do it. It was an escape hatch for me, like knowing, what, if things get any worse, I've got
Yeah,
this out.
yeah,
But what happened was, it's suicide never ends with you. It's passed on to your loved ones. And I knew I couldn't do that to my folks and to the people that did love me. I don't see suicide as a weakness. I see it as people hit a point where, unfortunately, that is their only way for any relief. And I get that. I get that level of pain.
yeah,
But I also focus, and I write about this, that you pass this on, you pass on that hurt
yeah.
and that legacy to other people and many other people in a circle. And I just couldn't do that. So, I really focused on, hey, this isn't the end. It feels like it, but I focused on what could be the past, that hope for a different outcome. I
Sure.
shifted my perspective. I found the humor. I started writing about it. It's funny to have that much stuff shoved up your dick and try to have, conversation. And it was always by a female, right?
Oh,
And, you're going in the office and, it's, these are intimate moments with strangers, and you
yeah.
don't want these. I go
No.
in on Tuesday again for a cystoscopy, and it's just always, you're in stirrups. Like, it's just so emasculating. There's nothing
Yeah.
more emasculating than this. And so, you have to find the humor. And I do, and I write about it. And
So,
and that's what got me through.
how did man? I always love sort of analyzing folks just because it's fascinating to me. because you're different than me, right? I don't know what I would do in these situations, but it probably wouldn't be like you did it. And so that's interesting to me. Like, how did this develop? And so I want to go back. You talked about the suicide of some friends. How old were you then, when those occurred?
Yeah, I started cutting at 13. And I was on antidepressants at that time, anti-anxiety meds and sleep pills. And, it was a very young age to be going through all that. And I don't know why I was so, I was adopted. I came with a lot of stuff. And I
Sure.
assumed that was rooted in me, and I had a lot of stuff to work out. And I grew up angry. And I was in Taekwondo, and I was fighting all the time and starting fights. And, I had my nose broke, my teeth broke, my orbital fractured. And
Shit.
still I was doing dumb stuff. I went through a couple of arrests, even in college. I had this kind of a dichotomy in my life where the anger side was getting me in a lot of trouble, but the academic side, I had some hope still for a different outcome for that future, was an honor roll, graduate student. I had a 4.0, but I also spent the last week of my final quarter of undergraduate college in jail, for fighting. And I graduated with a record, which was insane. I couldn't even get a job.
Wow.
Which was crazy. So I knew I had a lot of stuff to work out, and I did that through therapy.
Okay. So, I
So
mean, it all comes, I just think there's always something that occurs. I mean, yes, there could be some innate things, right? That, well, that was within me, but I always feel like there's some kind of catalyst or something to make you the way you are. I had another guy on, a regular fella, went through a divorce, and he's so calm and collected about it all. And yeah, we're kind of friends still with the ex. And I'm just like, that's fucking weird to me. And I'm like, but how are you like this? Like, and then he got back to, well, I did take a lot of martial arts when I was younger. I was like, okay, there we go. So there's always some kind of foundational or some kind of thing, I think, that helps direct us. It's not always just innate. I don't think. I could be wrong. I think there are some things that probably are, but would you say that therapy and all that, it sounds like you did a lot of work on yourself at some point. Did
God,
that
yeah, yeah.
that did that sort of allow you to navigate the cancer?
Yeah, I had to hit rock bottom though. Prior I was even hospitalized at 2 points in my life,
Shit.
for just giving up. I remember going into um, a psychiatric involuntary hold in a very scary place in Oakland, for a stint, and I just didn't care. I just didn't
Yeah.
give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
I was done. I got to a point where I couldn't eat, and I had to have an IV just to hydrate and feed me, and I
Jesus.
just gave up.
Yeah.
I didn't want to commit suicide, but I really didn't have the energy to go on.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I would say, and I certainly don't mean to. Therapy is amazing. I mean, everybody should have. It's like a coach. It's
Yeah.
it's your biggest proponent, and I think
100%.
anybody could benefit from therapy. And
Yes.
so I need to give props and a shout out to therapists and therapy in general, because I was able to vent all of this and find ways to deal with some of these intrusive thoughts and
Yeah.
the anxiety. And anxiety comes from, we're not even sure. It's part biological, it's part environmental. It could be seed planted from our parents,
Yeah.
but that doesn't really matter. It's what you do with it,
True.
that makes the difference, and where you channel it. And so, with therapy and through writing, that was really my saving grace.
Man, I got to tell you, John, I didn't know all of this stuff, and I want to commend you, my friend.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
What I mean, what a story! What an excellent example of what being a man ultimately means to me. Is you finally at some point said, okay, this is my shit. I have to fix it, and I have to deal with it. That to me is what a man is and what a man does. He owns his stuff, and you clearly did that. Wow, dude.
Well,
You said you've written some books. When are we getting the biography? Because I'm reading the fuck out of that thing.
it's funny because I still, at the time, my day job was selling hospital beds into ICUs and the VA and stuff. And I would see these guys who would come back from Afghanistan or Iraq, and they would have missing limbs, and they were, 20 years old, and they had to learn everything again. And I was like, God, can't believe I'm pitying myself over these guys that have given everything.
Yeah. Perspective is a
And
powerful thing.
oh, it's huge, right? And so, I don't think my story is my story in that if I didn't have these things, like I'm super thankful for cancer. I'm super thankful for that because it's interesting.
Hmm.
I had started pissing blood like 10 months prior, and I ignored it because I'm a guy, right? I knew that if I went in,
Right.
they were going to stick a camera up me, and
Yeah.
that was not going to be fun. So I
Yeah.
thought, I don't really care about my life. I was in that space and it was
Yeah.
dark, and I thought, whatever. I pissed blood for 3 days. It went away, and then on my birthday, 10 months later, I just lost that grandmother I spoke about, Hazel. And I just took a trip by myself over, it was Labor Day weekend. My birthday falls on. And as soon as I got to the hotel, I started pissing blood again. And I'm like, okay, this is not a good birthday. And I knew in that moment that I had cancer. I just knew. And so I went through that weekend, and then when I finally went in, they did some tests. I found this out, but it was like, you know, I've got to source some meaning right now, and I've got to find some. I was trying to work out and still, maintain a life. And I had a girlfriend at that time, but she was drinking too much. And I remember I dumped her too, and I got rid of all my friends, and I just went through this completely. It was just this amazing period of my life where I was like, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get rid of my friend. I'm just going to start with a clean slate on the other side of this.
Yeah.
And that's literally what I did. And it was, I don't wish this sort of level of adversity on anyone, to find this perspective. But I hope that other guys, I hope everybody in general can source this on their own, without that level of setback.
Yeah. So we definitely, I know I probably say this phrase way too fucking much. Sorry, everybody, but we definitely found some rabbit holes today.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, what a great story, John. I didn't know, man, honestly, what a fucking inspiration you are, my friend.
Well,
Sincerely.
that means a lot. I've never felt like an inspiration to anybody, but it means a lot to me. Thank you.
Oh, no, I'm very serious. You should write a biography. So, but let's get back to loneliness. So you went through this time, this period where, and in some ways you were lonely because of circumstances in terms of people sort of abandon you, I guess would be a proper way to describe it. And then also at some point you said you purged a lot of these people. So how did you get back from that? How did you start to climb out of that loneliness hole, so to speak?
Yeah, that's interesting because I was extremely lonely. I mean, I could feel it in my chest, right? I was like, man, I've spent my entire life surrounded by such a huge circle of people, and what vapid people they were, most of them. I can't speak for everybody because there were some good folks in there, and people that stepped up that I never expected, which was phenomenal. But for the most part, I didn't have very many close people in my life. And I always tell people there are worse things than being alone, and surrounding yourself with, shallow, negative, toxic, or self-serving people, like, the kind that jade us, is worse than being alone. It's better to start from scratch. We crawl before we learn to walk, and we spend time alone before we surround ourselves with the people that we do. And the people that we surround ourselves with form our outlook and our personality. So we need to be fiercely protective of that. So first thing I did was implement some boundaries. And, these are the kind of people I'm going to allow in my life. And these are the people that I will shun fervently. And I built from scratch from there. I joined the men's group. I reconnected with old friends that I had long lost touch with, that were good in my life, but we had just drifted apart. And that's, find the commonality. I would find people that, where are my people? Where are the people that are where I spend time with, whether it's running or at the gym or, in whatever endeavors I'm doing. I got into surfing again and, made connections that way, et cetera. So, and then I put out that vulnerability, and I find that I call it the vulnerability kimono. Once I opened it was like, look, I'm a man still, but I'm lonely and I need friends. And I walked out of the forest of loneliness, and exposed myself essentially. Other guys were like, oh man, I was the same way. It's hard to make
Yeah.
friends as an adult, right? You're
Yeah.
in college, it's so easy. You're spoon-fed friendships. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
built into the process. And then you
Yeah.
get maybe your first job and you get some friends that way. But then when, COVID hit, et cetera, we've had,
Yeah.
it's been a pandemic of loneliness. It literally is an epidemic of loneliness for me.
I agree.
And it's killing us. And so,
Yes.
I found the commonality with other guys and built from there. I mean, you and I have commonality. You and
For
I
sure.
have built a bond in our conversations.
I honestly swear to God, I was just thinking, I fucking want to hug him so bad. Like I just, could you come to Pennsylvania? Is that on
Yeah,
your,
right.
you gonna do a book tour or, yeah.
And I
mean,
forgot to mention I'm in California on the Central Coast. So yeah, it's a good 3,000-mile jaunt, but yeah.
I mean, if anyone
One
wants
day.
to donate a plane ticket for me to get to John, I would appreciate it. But you're right. I mean, I think the solution, ultimately is vulnerability, because if you're vulnerable enough to say I am lonely, that's the start, right? And then the question is, what do I do now? And I've talked to many people on this topic, and it's put yourself out there seems to be the best answer. Is put yourself out there, try things, go to different meetups, and that's part of what I'm trying to do, is build out a network of divorced men. So cities all over the world, I want to create like the AA for divorced men. It's just sometimes I think
Awesome.
there's a difficulty sometimes in getting men to be vulnerable, to say, oh yeah, shit, I am lonely right now, and maybe I do need to take some actions to alleviate that. But it's such a stigma that if you do that, you're a bitch. Don't be a bitch. Man up.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's like, what does this guy want? And
right.
I say find the commonality and go from there. It could be like, you made a little human. Well, so did I. I have a son.
Yeah.
What do you have? And
Yeah.
or saying, hey, we should hit happy hour after work, or Top Golf, or whatever. The shortest route to making new friends, I do want to stress, is to rejoin the former friends that you had, the good people. They know you best, after all. They knew what shitty beer you drank when you were 21 and you had a mullet, and they knew these things about you, and there's commonality already built in. In the absence of a cache of former friends, you could make new ones, and this is somebody that spots you at the gym on the bench press, or a coworker, or like I mentioned, a men's group. There's men's groups at every religious entity. Or I would drive through town on the weekend sometimes, and I'd see these gatherings of people staring at their phones, and I realized there was these Pikachu expedition clubs, and I'm like, man, these people have more friends than I do, and they're a bunch of nerds. Like, are you serious? And then I'm like, I shouldn't rip on that, because they have these great consortium of people and I don't. So it's joining social media groups, like you said, that are built on interests, whether you stand up paddleboard, or you snowshoe, or you cross country run, or you like beer and you microbrew, or football. Join your favorite team's football group. But I stress that to make a friend, it does take the vulnerability that you and I talked about, which is a strength. Let me say it again. Vulnerability is a strength. That is not a weakness, because it takes incredible strength to say, hey, I am man, but I need fellow men. I need fellow fire starters, right?
Yes.
And if your partner is your only friend, which men tend to do, we lean on our partner for those friendships. And there's a skit on Saturday Night Live called Man Park, which is absolutely fantastic. I don't if anybody Google SNL Man Park, and
I've seen it.
It's fantastic, right? We need that. We need it to survive. So it's really not so much being vulnerable as using common sense. Like, I'm going to die without friends slowly, because I'm going to have these conditions.
I was thinking about that 22%. So it shortens our lifespan 22%, right? So what is that in real numbers? Because I'm really fucking bad at math. What does that take off your life? 7, 8 years? I don't even know. Like, what? So let's say it's 80. It was probably 75, right? Is life expectancy. Let's call it 70, because again, I'm a simple fella. So that could take what? We're talking 14 years of your life potentially. Could be,
for sure. Yeah. I mean,
Christ.
Genetics is the gun, lifestyle is the trigger, right? So we're all wired differently. We may have conditions that are exacerbated by loneliness. If you've got a bad heart, you're going to have a much higher chance of cardiovascular disease if you're spending your time alone. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's an average of at least 7 years. And men die earlier anyway because we internalize everything. So
Wow.
being vulnerable is a life-saving measure. And you're still a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You could still be who you are and be vulnerable, and people will appreciate it. And you'll find that other men have the same. You know,
Yes.
when you say to another guy like you and I met, and it was like, hey man, it's hard to make friends. It is.
Yeah, it is. For sure it is. I mean, listen, I wouldn't be able to, this isn't the first time I've covered this fucking topic. And there's a reason for that, because I see it all the time, especially, and you mentioned it, you know, making a spouse your only friend. And then a divorce happens, and then you look around and you have no friends, or the friends you had came from her or whatever, and then you
Yeah, yeah.
realize, shit, you're similar to your situation, where you're going through this excruciating thing, and you look around and you have no fucking buddy there, and we got to change it. And if it requires just saying, hey man, I'm kind of lonely, you want to hang out? If that's all it fucking takes, and for goodness gracious sake, go do that thing, and then add these years back to your life. Have some joy and some happiness, and set yourself up for a better life in general. You know, if all it takes is a little vulnerability and some effort, fuck man, what are we not doing here? Come on.
Yeah, it is a crisis. And
For sure.
especially in the last couple of years when we've even further isolated, and I'm guilty of that. You know, I still isolate, and I want to stress this formula for making friends. It takes effort plus momentum to make a friend. And so you can have the intention, like we're talking about, like, oh, I need friends. Yeah, I'm going to do that. But you have to then act. So it's really intention plus effort plus momentum. So you have the intention, you have to make the strides, join that group, reach out to somebody, go to the gym and spot somebody, whatever. And then you have to keep doing that. You have to keep going, and, you know, go to the dog park with your dog, or the beach, whatever. If you're in the middle of the country, you know, I don't know what people do, because I've been on the coast my whole life. So I'm always talking about the beach. I'm walking distance from it.
Oh,
but
that sounds lovely.
Yeah, I'm behind Pebble Beach, but I don't golf. I actually hate golf. And I can't swing it because I've had 10 shoulder surgeries. So I am a T-Rex. But you have to have that momentum, and it has to be sustainable. You have to keep doing it. And it's hard. And it's hard for me too. It
is hard. It's definitely not easy. And like I said, I'm trying to create these local groups through the larger group that I have on Facebook. And I'm trying to create offshoots, these little subgroups. And I need people to help run them, because that momentum part, I believe, is key too, because we are so adept at isolation. We need to sort of be reminded or prodded in kind of a way, like, hey guys, what's everyone doing this weekend, or how about next weekend? What can happen is everyone joins, and then no one's sort of leading the pack, so to speak, and then it dies. And it's like every once in a while, someone like, hey, can we get together this weekend? And it's crickets. And then 3 weeks, someone else will. So it's definitely it needs work, much like anything worth fucking doing does, right? If you want to look like The Rock, you can't hit the gym once a week. Like it takes work and takes effort. But again, the rewards are pretty fucking crystal clear to me. If you're telling me, if I get some more friends, I'm going to add potentially, right? Of course, there are other factors and all this kind of shit, but I'm going to add some years to my life. Sign me up, man. I'd rather
100%
live.
you are. Yeah. You're going to live longer.
Yeah.
And, you know, it is, especially, I have anxiety in all forms. I've generalized. I have a little bit of OCD. I have social anxiety, which means that I'm always committing to things, because I love to tell people, yes, Michael, I'm going to go. I'll be there, man. I'll have to work. And then it gets there and it's like, oh man, why did I commit?
Yeah.
It's the last thing I want to do. So that's where the momentum comes in, and the effort. You know, you've got to actually go and deliver on it. And that's a hard part for guys. And I think, because, you know, we internalize a lot, and we're always trying to work fixers. And you know, for me, it's like, I've got a book release in December. I've got another one following that. And then I have a sequel to my adult book that I'm working on the book proposal for. So these things are stacking up, and it's like, I just have to work. And I've been doing 12-hour days, at least 6 days a week. And it's like, this is no balance, and I'm really unhappy. And I'm not following my own advice. I'm like a cardiovascular surgeon that's outside smoking and on his breaks, you know, and it's like, sometimes I'm the worst at heeding my own advice, but I also know that it's taking a toll on me, and I have to pull back and I have to get out there. And so I'm consciously doing that. I'm making plans and I'm sticking to them and following through.
That's tough. I commend you. I want to go back to anxiety because I don't think I have it. My oldest daughter has generalized anxiety disorder, and so I want to talk about that a little bit from your perspective. What is that? What does that mean to you? You have generalized anxiety disorder. What does that mean by
Yeah.
your definition?
I think one of the easiest ways to explain it is for generalized, which is a kind of a catch-all, and it's the biggest kind of compartment of anxiety. That's what most people suffer from. And it's different than acute anxiety, which is when you board a plane to Boise and it's going to Buffalo and they shut the doors and you're like, how did I screw this up? And you get that panic, right? That's acute. Yeah. And it's, we get through that. And anxiety is a necessary component to survival. It's ingrained in our brain. It's grooved deep. It's a survival tactic. It's what gave us the wherewithal to run from the saber-toothed tigers and from tribes and threats in our life. And we still need it. If you're walking on a dark street at night and you hear footsteps behind you, that's anxiety kicking in saying, hey, you might want to look behind you. This may not be a non-threat. But it's when it becomes chronic, and it goes for like past 3 months and it's affecting your work, your sleep, and your general life, that you really need to take a look and get some help and talk to somebody. And it's a sense of dread more than anything. It's a sense of there's a threat somewhere. I don't know what it is. I can't identify it, but I know it's there. And people with anxiety will perceive these threats in a lot of different platforms. And even though it's not there, and it could be in relationships or work or just about anywhere. And it becomes debilitating if it gets to a certain level and you start getting panic attacks and that sort of thing. And so you want to catch it early, like most things. You want to start treating it early, and you treat it with various tactics that come from like cognitive behavioral therapy. And like if you have OCD, for example, and I went through this, it was fantastically disgusting. I went in to my therapist, and it was in a hospital, and we were working on OCD that day. And he said, I need you to go into the bathroom and touch everything. Just really get in there and rub your hands on everything. Toilet handle, yeah, doorknobs, everything. And you're not allowed to wash your hands. You need to come back in here. So, for 1 minute, I had to rub my hands on everything. And I don't know if they would do this today. We have a few things going around like monkeypox, et cetera. Right. But, I had to sit, then go back into his office and sit there calmly and talk to him and let the anxiety subside within me to the point where I forgot what I had touched. And it worked. And, it was, that's a mass exposure. That's a triage, kind of just full bore anxiety exposure. And that's a tactic in exposure response prevention. So you get exposed, your response, you want to tamper. So there's all these different tactics to work on anxiety, but that's kind of, and that's a whole separate conversation. And
but I do want to touch on this. Yeah, I want to touch on this real quick though. So essentially what you're saying is something like, okay, you touch the sink, and if you've ever been to a public bathroom, you all know, as Dane Cook hilariously said once, everything is wet. Right. So if you go into a public bathroom and you touch the sink and it's, or even, around the sink and it's all wet, it's disgusting. Okay. So then what? So then you're coming out and you're distracting yourself, or because,
oh yeah, I'm on the verge of a panic attack. And
I would be fuck yeah. I don't even consider myself to having anxiety, but that sounds fucking terrible to me. So is it a matter of the strategy is sort of distraction until you forget that you just did all that shit? Is that sort of the strategy?
No, it's to sit with it. It's to know it's there.
Okay.
And to accept it radically. So I'm radically accepting this. It's not going to kill me. Okay. Yeah, it's dirty. It's gross. It's like Campylobacter and E. coli and C. diff and, who knows what else, CRE. I mean, there's some really threatening things in a hospital. Yeah. And just to sit with it. I'm not going to lick my fingers, but I'm going to, just let my hands fall by the wayside and be okay. And when our appointment's over, I can go wash them. And God, I got to tell you, man, it really, I calmed down. Like it wasn't fatal. you know?
Yeah, true.
So, I mean, he didn't ask me to lick everything in the bathroom. That would be different.
Right.
But yeah. And
So
so
it's
that
like
was
it's like
exposure.
sitting with it, like sitting. I kind of preach all the time. Sit with your pain. Feel it in your body, especially, but feel your pain. It's sort of similar. Like you can't run from these things, right?
Right. I mean, you can, it's a fight or flight response, but that's not you run from the threatening thing that might kill you.
Sure.
Uh, but most things aren't going to kill us. Most
No.
things aren't threatening. And so I bring up this drastic exposure scenario because
Sure.
that's how you handle these other things. So if you have a presentation, you embrace it. You go in with an open mind and you just radically do it. I use that word radically because it takes that kind of acceptance to just face something. And if you're feeling test anxiety, you prep for it. You prep as best you can for that exam, and you go in armed with it. And so there's all these different tactics I talk about. There's distress tolerance. There's radical acceptance, which I have alluded to. There's breathing techniques, etc. But yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I don't think I struggle with anxiety. I mean, that scenario you described with touch and shit makes me anxious, I guess. But
Well, you have some level to survive, right?
yeah,
but you
I would
don't have it.
imagine. Yeah, I would imagine. Well, you said we kind of all do, so and it makes sense.
Right,
I never really thought of it in that way.
Yeah, and then there's I just lost track of my thought, but we all will perceive it in some level in our day-to-day interactions, but we don't react or even take note of it sometimes because it's just built into us as this is how we function. Like if you're driving and somebody suddenly changes lanes and didn't see you, you're going to feel a sense of panic, and you're going to get out of the way, or you're going to flip them off or whatever. That's the anxiety you don't even notice. I mean, it's just keeping you safe and you're responding. But when you get this threat perception in your own house and, it's getting disruptive to your work, or you're perceiving things that somebody's saying on a Zoom call for work and they're side-eyeing you or whatever. And you're like, oh, they're mean mugging me on this call. What are they thinking? And that's when it's getting disruptive, and it really can impact your job. I've quit jobs. I've walked out of corporate jobs just because I had a bad meeting. I mean, I've let anxiety train wreck my life in so many ways that I had to take control, and I had to get a handle on it. And I knew that I had to learn some skills. So,
yeah, well, again, bravo, kudos to you, my friend. I think.
Well, I always say if people can come through my level of anxiety, anybody can. I mean, it's just been paralyzing. What I wanted to bring up earlier that I forgot was the panic attack situation. There's an actual methodology that if you feel a panic attack coming on, you worsen it by trying to deny it, by saying, oh God, I'm having a panic attack. I don't want to have this. Yeah. If you actually accept it and try to just breathe through it, it takes away its power. Yeah. And it's clinically proven and it works. And so, this facing these things, anxiety, it needs to be challenged. It grows, it festers, and it becomes chronic when we ignore it. And then it becomes the life driver in our day-to-day. And that's what you don't want.
I think that can be the same can be said for the pain of a breakup in a way, right? You can't,
for sure,
you can't ignore it. You can't fuck it away or drink it away or snort it away or
temporarily.
Yeah. But it always, it doesn't go away, right? Unless you absolutely deal with it and face it.
Yeah. You can try to, there's that saying, the quickest way over one is under another, but you end up in that dirty sex scenario and you're clawing for your underwear with your toes in the bed to get the hell out of there because, this isn't somebody you would even hook up with normally or whatever.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, we all have, right? And then you just now you have anxiety, you have depression, and now you've got this regret. And it's a temporary thing. And a breakup, and I write this in my book, Anxiety Hacks for an Uncertain World. It's every chapter, there's 22 chapters, is a trigger. And one is breakup and divorce. And so, I talk about what it's like to go through it. I have a lot of anecdotal evidence. And then we dive into I brought in a PsyD for some of the tactics, but then we review the tactics of how to get through it specifically.
Yeah.
moment to moment.
Mm.
And sometimes you are just going moment to moment, and that's
True.
okay.
Yeah.
It's a lot of mindfulness, it's breathing tactics, it's distress tolerance, it's these things. And do you want to talk about that some more about those
Yeah,
tactics?
we can dive into that. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it is an absolute trigger going through, especially if you're on the receiving end, right? And, I talk about some of these more prominent tactics to get through the anxiety of a breakup or divorce. And one of them is, and I always suggest this to people, is to have a breakup buddy. There's somebody that you need in your life that you can go to and be like, man,
Right.
I'm really suffering. I'm crying. I'm not eating. And this needs to be the person that you reach out to rather than your ex, because, I don't suggest sending dick pics to your breakup buddy, but you can send everything else that you're thinking, like, I really want to text her or him or, and, you can go to this person and tell them, because you need somebody to think for you when you're in these situations in the short term.
Yes.
Because your thinking is clouded. You're convinced that reaching out or hooking up with them again is going to fix the problem. More often than not, it's not going to fix it. So this is somebody that will counter your ill-advised thoughts in those dangerous moments of relapse, and
I like it.
who is empathetic and will handle the mood swings and random lunacy that you're going to fire at them when you're in that early throes of a breakup. The next thing I would suggest is you got to, when you go through a breakup, and even if you're on the receiving end, is you break up with everything, right? Maybe there's a chance there's going to be reconciliation on the back end. That doesn't matter. Right now, it's self-preservation mode. And you're not going to be preserving your psyche if you're getting updates on social media or, seeing what their friends are posting, et cetera.
Yes.
Many of us are old enough to remember when a split would happen when we had dumb phones or phones tethered to a wall, and we didn't have all of this information flying at us, at Wi-Fi speed, and breaking up was a discrete event. It was less grueling. The world was offline, and it really was easier. And now, I suggest that folks do break up with the social media as well. At the very least, you can unfollow people. You don't need those updates right now.
100% agree. Yep.
And if there is a chance for reconciliation, if that's something you want and it's a healthy relationship, then, you're not going to be missed if you never go away. And so, right now, go away and be great and be gone. Make your last gesture a good one, a healthy one, and then be gone. And this is for you, not for the other person. You're not like, oh, if I'm gone, they'll miss me and want me back. Well, maybe but again, it's for you. And related to that, another thing I like to stress to folks is the solution is within you. It's not within that person. It's not with your ex. And we want to fix things as guys, and we're convinced we can fix every relationship that goes sour. And we're convinced that our purview is the right one, right? Even in my current relationship, I'm constantly going through roadblocks and breakups, even because I don't, it's hard to break through with me for her. And so I'm not always, intimacy is always tough for me. And it's something I'm working on, but I'm convinced that I'm, the greatest lover of all time. And, that's actually not true. I'm learning that on the regular. And so, when you go through a breakup, I've been through many, I have a record of choosing badly. So those end badly. And, we pick the people that reflect our state of mind at the time. If you're in a low place, you're going to pick somebody that's not good for you.
Yes.
And which is why being alone is a great thing.
Oh, amen. Amen. Amen.
That's the time we, figure out who we need to be with and what we need. And so I really want to stress that your peace and healing is never within someone else. Everything you need is within you. And that is counterintuitive when you're going through a breakup, because you're convinced this other person is going to save me. I need them to save me. But they're not. It's a crutch. It's an escape. And you were whole and you were grand before this person. And you have to reflect on who you were. before that, and assume that you're not getting back together, because we don't know, and maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't, but if you don't, you're going to be okay. And it doesn't feel that way in the moment, but when you get some distance from it, that's when you realize, holy Toledo, shit, I am a whole entity.
Yeah.
You know, 1 + 1 isn't 2, it's enmeshment.
Yeah.
Well, it is 2. 1 + 1 isn't 1. 1 + 1 is 2, because you
Right.
are separate. And it's
Yeah.
when 1 + 1 becomes 1,
Yeah.
that's enmeshment.
Yeah.
And that's not healthy.
No, it's not.
We do not want to merge with another person. We want to be independent fence posts that support one another, but can stand alone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and what I see frequently is, and I preach this stuff all the time. You were preaching to the choir, my friend. I couldn't said it any better. In fact, you've said it way better than I could. But I what I see then is guys, they dive into the next one. And, oh, she's so amazing. Yeah. She's the greatest thing ever. And then 6 months, a year, whatever it is, maybe 10. I don't know. Usually not that long. Couple months, year. Oh, she was the worst. Women are the worst. It's all these women. Women are terrible. It has nothing to do with me or my choices. It's them. And it's like,
wherever you go, there you are. You're going to drag your shit and your baggage and your breakups. If you don't deal with them, they will follow you, and you will deal with them in the next relationship, whether they manifest 100%. In that relationship or not. You have brought that pain and that what you haven't dealt with into that relationship. So what happens is all that culminates into, now you're with the third one after that big breakup you didn't deal with, but now you're going to deal with it when that ends, and you will.
Yep.
So when those ties get severed for whatever reason, you've got to do it. And this is what women are great at. In a breakup, women deal with the pain and the hurt and the separation and all the crap on the front end. Yes. They're masters at this.
Yes.
And they typically don't go hooking up with another guy. I'm not to say that they don't, but that's not really their methodology. They're masters at healing and moving forward after they heal. Whereas guys do it on the back end. We do exactly what you described. We'll drink, we'll go to strip clubs, whatever. We'll hook up, we'll go online, we'll swipe right on everything we can. And we don't deal with it until later. By the time we deal with it, our ex is now over it, and we're just now starting to process it.
Yeah, I think what I see typically is women will resolve all of their shit while still in the relationship.
Sometimes they do that too.
And still they will find another towards the end, or the other becomes the absolute last part catalyst to, like, they've been dealing with it. They're not happy. They've decided they're working through it. And then someone comes along and, okay, this is, yes, I definitely should then. And because they've worked through all their shit, they don't have the same feelings for you. Unfortunately, this is just my experience. Again, anecdotal.
Spot on. Yeah.
But, and then it seems and feels like it's a sudden thing. And I was reading an article yesterday about the walkaway wife syndrome. It's a common theme amongst the community, and I think there's some real validity to it. But and I think it was perhaps the person actually coined the phrase. She sort of wrote a second part, and she was describing essentially what happens is women get fed up with not getting what they need, and as we described, they go through all the shit and they process it, and then they also shut up about it, like they stop complaining. And because they're
dangerous time.
Right, they've given up, and then the guy thinks, "Oh, well, finally, everything's good," and then all of a sudden, there's a departure that feels sudden, but is not to the woman. She's been working on this shit for a little while, which is it's crazy and it's sad and it's frustrating and it's a lot of things. And the other part of it, though, she's like, you know what? There is a piece of this that women have to take responsibility for, and I'm paraphrasing, and you guys can go find the article and read it yourself, but once they get to a point where they're sort of done, then intimacy stops too. And so it's this sort of like really negative feedback loop. So the guy doesn't open up because he's not getting any intimacy, so he'll shut down too. And it's like it's just this really sad sort of dance that, in my view, and some people call this, it's feminine to talk for whatever fucking reason, but it would all be solved with a fucking conversation or 100 or whatever. But like, if you don't fucking talk about it, and this is where I think chicken or egg? Like, is it the woman not expressing herself, or is it the woman tired of expressing herself and not being heard, whatever the fuck that could mean, right? I'm not 100% sure on that, but it is essentially something where if both parties were open and vulnerable and honest, we could avoid some of this shit. But
God, yeah. Yeah. That's a whole nother podcast because you nailed it. And it's the latter, by the way.
yeah,
The men don't often want to hear it or we can't hear it.
I know for me that was the case, because this is
Yeah.
the conclusion I came to. When she would get emotional about things, I couldn't fucking handle it, and so I would shut
Yeah,
the
yeah.
conversation down.
We don't speak that language, right?
Exactly, right. And it's like, well, that's a shitty way to be. Like, someone's coming to you with their vulnerability and you can't handle it, and you're a dick about it. Like, what a fucking asshole I was. And there's no question that I was at times. I think in general, I was a good husband. I think we could have worked things out. You kind of said, earlier, like, men like to fix things. So I think it was fixable. Fuck yeah, it was, because it was something, right? It was a thing. And so I believe you can make it back to that thing. But that was,
Well, you did the best you could with the skills you had at the time.
100%.
We don't get these skills on the
No.
fly. Like, we get them as we live and
Yep.
we go through relationships, and each one grooms and hones us and sculpts us into a better relationship partner. And I've been on that end. I've had those conversations, and where it was like, oh my God, what, you're leaving?
Right.
But I missed when I traced it back. I was like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
she actually told me this 1,000 times, literally.
Yeah.
And I missed all of it. And yeah, it's just like the communication styles of men versus women. And God, everything could be, I mean, wars could be prevented from communications, right? I mean, it's
Amen.
huge. It's such an elementary, fundamental skill that we do not give any credit or weight to.
Yeah. Well, we
because
don't learn how to do it either. Like, what is there a conversation class in high school or college, or, you know what I mean? We
should
don't.
be.
100% there should be, but there definitely isn't. And you're right. It not only could it solve relationships in terms of intimate ones, it can solve a whole lot of fucking relationships, whether it be cross countries or coworkers or whatever. It's a skill that we all need, but few have, honestly. I'm getting there.
We all want to get our message across. Listening is an art, and people will hear, but they hear and they listen to respond rather than pausing, taking the information in, and then responding to it. And so that is a problem. And yeah, communication styles have ended countless relationships, and we see it every day in wars and corporate breakdowns and fights and road rages. And I had a road rage many years ago. I was in my 20s, and we ended up on the side of the freeway fighting, and then we just realized how stupid it was. And we both looked at each other, and I kid you not, we damaged each other's cars, we punched each other, and we ended up hugging it out. We went and got a beer. I'm not kidding. And I mean, had we just communicated in the beginning, and not thrown blows and been stupid, it could have ended horribly, like it often does. But God, if we just would have been like, hey man, I'm sorry. But we see apologies as a weakness as well. And it's really not. Again, that's a strength. It's showing vulnerability. It's showing that I'm fallible.
Yeah.
I make mistakes as a human and as a man, and I'm sorry. And then, and really owning it. So anyway, I know we're over time, but
no worries. Listen, this is awesome. And I thank you so very much. And I got to tell you, John, I'm really excited to ask this last question to you, because your clarity, your opinions, I mean, they just are such an alignment with me. I hear and see and feel like just a very fucking caring man. And I thank you for doing this. And I am.
Will you be my friend?
100%. I'm gonna get a piggy bank. I'm gonna put money in that fucker until I can save up for a plane ticket. But I'm really excited to get your answer on this last question. And that is, what words of wisdom would you impart to a man who is just starting out his divorce process?
Yeah. And I want to go back to that, always assemble your troops before you need them. A lot of guys, we won't build those friendships. And then when we go through a divorce or a breakup, we're like, shit, where are my friends?
Yeah.
I blew them off for this woman. or man. And it's, God, man, you've got to try to keep those people in your life. If not, reach out to people. If you think that if it's really hurting you, please, and I really stress this one, is seek a professional help, seek a therapist. It's again, a strength. You've got to get some stuff off your chest and out of your head. You need some coping tactics. You've got to make sound decisions. And when we're in that space, it's a dark, dark place. I get it. And you need a guide to get you through that. And again, you have the skills to get through it, but you may not necessarily realize what they are, how to use them. We've got this toolbox. It's, always compared to a really extensive, nice, toolbox. And you open the door and you have all this hardware and you have no idea how to use it. You have all these tools in your head. We all do. We're created with them, but we don't know how to use them, leverage them, tap into them, make them work. And stay away from the substances. This is only going to hamper you. Alcohol is a depressant. Weed isn't, there's all this, I like to do edibles to sleep, et cetera, but you got to be very careful with this stuff. It can really, really impair you in a darker way. It's okay to make a mistake. If you reach out to somebody and you want to just hook up, we all make mistakes. Don't beat yourself up if that happens. But again, the solution is within you. Forgive is another one. Forgive yourself. Forgive the other person. Forgiveness is giving up the hope of a different outcome. It's not, it's okay that I was horrible or you were horrible. That's not what it is. This is, again, about releasing regret and saying, hey, I'm going to learn from this. I call it practicing breakup dementia. You've been forgiven. You need to forgive yourself. And even if you were at fault. And the truth is, most of us are doing the best we can with the skills we have at any given moment. And practice some self-soothing. Be good to yourself.
Yes. You
need sleep. You need to eat right. Do some comeback cardio, get out there, hit the trails, work out. If you need to journal, do that. And remember that everything, and I'll close with this, everything in the past is going to seem better. And I call this, don't get kicked in the nostalgias. Nostalgia has a utopian aspect because it's imagination. You're reminiscing about a previous romantic love. Your past difficulties are often overlooked. You're idealizing your ex and the time you spent together. You have this image in your head that the past looks so perfect, but it is a mirage and it's created by nostalgia. Yeah. The past holds nothing for you now. So stop looking there.
Man. Excellent words of wisdom, my friend. Thanks again, John, for doing this. Really appreciate it. Let's recap on how people can find you and your books and stuff.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm at stateofanxiety.com. I can be contacted there. I do coaching. I do help people through stuff like this. And the new book release is at anxietyhacks.co. I have a free chapter there you can download, and there's no hook. You just give me your email and get a chapter of the new book before it's released. So, and that chapter is on state of the world. So it's quite relevant for everything that we're seeing today. So
yeah, for sure.
Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks. We'll definitely stay in touch. I have a new friend, everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're
John.
buds.
Thanks again. And hopefully, we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, man. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. Thank you to Nick Coyle and Lifer for allowing me to use their song, Born Again, which you're hearing now and at the intro to the podcast. Thank you to Justin Dillahanty and all of my brothers at the Alpha Code. Please visit the website risingphoenixpodcast.com to connect with me and other like-minded men who are looking to thrive and grow after their divorce. And remember to surround yourself with people who add value to your life, who challenge you to be greater than you were yesterday, who sprinkle magic into your existence like you do to theirs. Life is not meant to be done alone. Find your tribe. Take care.